everybody. It's the Van Show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited because today we have the Cory Doctorow. Say hello, Cory.
Hello, it's nice to see you, Van.
Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see you. I'm really excited you decided to come on the show.
I never miss a chance to talk to a puppet.
We're happy to hear that.
Right.
And so we want to know a little bit about you. So first of all, tell us where you're from.
So I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada.
Oh yeah?
It's a city that never sleeps in.
Oh, yeah, everyone's up and early? Up.
It's, New York run by the Swiss.
Like, you are one of the smartest people I think we've ever had on the show.
Oh my goodness, thank you very much.
Well, I like to butter up my guests.
I call me thoroughly buttered.
So I don't know, do you want to talk about where you reside currently?
Sure, yeah, I live in a town called Burbank, which is just on the outskirts of Los Angeles.
Okay.
Like Sarah Palin being able to see Russia from her front door, I can see Hollywood from mine.
So Cory, we brought you on here because you're a writer.
I am indeed a writer. I've written more than 20 books, mostly science fiction, some for young adults, some for middle grades readers, many for adults. I've also written a bunch of nonfiction, mostly about technology policies. So for more than 20 years, I've worked with a nonprofit called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We actually have a chapter here in Austin, the EFF Austin. And we're kind of a digital human rights group. I was their European director, and I served at the United Nations and in Brussels and in Westminster, and worked on issues related to privacy, competition, and censorship and so on. And then I've also written a picture book for little kids called Posey the Monster Slayer, about a little girl who loves monsters and keeps her parents up all night by repurposing her toys as field expedient monster killing weapons, and hunts the monsters who come into her room, and her parents keep coming in and tucking her back into bed, and she keeps getting out to mess around with the werewolves and the zombies and so on.
That's amazing. So when was it that you discovered that you liked writing, that writing was something that maybe you liked more than the other kids, or maybe it wasn't until you were an adult? I don't want to presume.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I have spent a lot of time teaching writing. I'm on the board of the Clarion Foundation that runs the Clarion Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Workshop, and I teach there, and I teach at Clarion West and at Viable Paradise, and I'm an alumnus of it, and so on. And one of the things that I've concluded is that talent, to whatever extent it exists, is completely overshadowed by practicing without noticing, because you do something and you find it fun to do, and you just do it for a long time, and then one day someone says, hey, you're talented at that. And what you really are is someone who just put in the hours without thinking that you were practicing. And so for me, my first recollection of it started in 1977. My dad took us all downtown to see Star Wars at the University Theater, which was one of our great movie palaces, long gone now. And so Star Wars was the first multi-POV, non-linear, reversals, high-tension, audio-visual drama that I remembered seeing. And when I got home, I wanted to figure out how it worked. And so we had scrap paper, and I got it and I folded it over like a zine and stapled it up the middle and trimmed it to the size of a paperback. And then I just wrote out the Star Wars story over and over again, like a kid practicing scales on the piano. And I think I was just trying to work out how it worked. And that was my first recollection. And I wrote stories in school and so on. And certainly, the people around me were very enthusiastic that I was writing. I got a lot of positive feedback for it, so I think that probably helped. But I also grew up in a milieu where being a science fiction writer had the closest thing to a formal apprenticeship that I think has ever existed anywhere in the world. And that's all because of a woman called Judith Merrill. When I was at Clarion, one of my instructors was the great Kate Wilhelm, who had been an editor under Frederick Pohl at IF magazine. And he actually transferred editorship to her at a certain point. And she told us this story about how for years they would get a manuscript every week from this writer. And not only were the manuscripts bad, but they didn't get better. And just week after week, this guy would send a story, and they put a form rejection in and send it back. And on Fred's last week before he handed it over to Kate, he wrote this guy a letter, and he said, dear whatever, I've never done this before, and please don't take offense, but I have to tell you, I don't think you're going to become a better writer. I think that you should find a different hobby, or if you like doing this, do it for your friends, but you're just sort of wasting your money on postage and so on. And maybe you need to do something else, rethink what you want to do with your life. Thank you very much, Frederick Pohl, out the door. So the next week, they get a manuscript from this guy, and Kate Wilhelm opens it up. And the cover letter says, Dear Mr. Pohl, for many years I've sent you a manuscript every week as I labored, and all I got were these firm rejections. And to tell you the truth, I was ready to give up. But then I got your kind note, and I was reinvigorated in myself and my feeling that maybe I really did have a career doing this writing stuff. And he continued to send an execrable manuscript every week for Kate's entire tenure.
It's like the writing equivalent of, so you're saying I've got a chance.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's so great. Oh my goodness. So can you talk a little bit about that time in your life where you were kind of collecting the rejection letters? I guess in so much as it's not an uncommon story that we've heard from a lot of authors and artists in general, that you keep working and you keep collecting those rejection letters because writing is like building muscles, and you have to keep at it to like get better, and like the more you do it, the better you get. Except in that last story you told, obviously
not always.
Not always.
Not always. That guy probably got better at typing, if nothing else.
There you go. Yes, much faster. But yeah, like what was that like for you? I mean, I imagine there were times, especially if it went on for a while, that it was discouraging.
Oh, it was very discouraging, and there were lots of times where I felt like giving up. The writing itself felt very satisfying, and I think that there is another phase change that writers have to go through, because when you start writing, you write because it feels intrinsically satisfying, sort of by definition. There's no other reason that you should be writing at that age and at that stage. And then there comes a point where you actually start selling work, and you have to write when you're not inspired. And I went through this phase where I was really struggling, and then I started to my other professional work took off. So I started off working in the tech sector, building websites and CD-ROMs and Gopher sites, and then ultimately getting involved in tech policy. And I was on the road. I had started a software company. I was doing all this stuff while I was writing, and I had to keep producing under these conditions that got harder and harder, where I had less and less time. I was more and more stressed. There were more and more demands on my time. I was spending more time in hotels. I was spending more time on planes, and I just was much less able to kind of lure the muse into the room with scented candles and the perfect environment. And what I found and what saved me was this realization that while there were days where it felt like I was writing really well, and while there were days that I felt like I was writing really badly, and while in retrospect, when I went back and looked at the work after it sat for a while and kind of ripened, there were passages that were really good and even great, and not only didn't need any work, but I could feel quite proud of, and passages that really needed to be redone from the ground up, that they were unrelated. Oh. That like how I felt about the work was a function of like how much sleep I was getting, and whether I'd had a fight with my girlfriend, and where my blood sugar was at, and not a function of the words themselves. And you have to kind of trick yourself, or if not trick yourself, kind of bully yourself into writing under those conditions. So if you've ever seen the VR demo where you put the brick on your face and it shows you that you are standing on a plank sticking out over the Empire State Building, and there's like a 15-story drop to the ground below, or a 30-story drop to the ground below, and there's a plank on the carpet, and you have to walk across that plank. And if you've ever seen videos of people doing this demo, they are absolutely riven with fear, right? Every fiber of their body is saying, you are about to fall. Now, intellectually, you're not.
Yeah.
Right? It's not. You're in this condition of like a duality in which there is this like unsilenceable voice saying you are in terrible danger, and then a rational voice saying that is nonsense. And to get across the plank, you just have to bully that unsilenceable voice into shutting up. And it's the same with working on the days when you're not feeling it, right? You just have to like sit down and, bum and seat, fingers on keyboard, do your words. And you may, like every word you type may feel like unworthy drivel. And it may be, but it may not be. And you will not know until long after the fact. And so, this was like the big transition that I made. And luckily for me, because I'm not very bright, it took me 10 years to realize the corollary, which is that on the days when you feel really good about your work, you might be writing drivel. And all that warm glow you feel from writing stuff that you're quite proud of is probably stolen valor, and it might be junk. And so, that kind of anhedonic realization, I am also reasonably good at compartmentalizing, and I did not come to for quite some time, and managed to continue to get some intrinsic satisfaction from writing.
Absolutely. Well, Cory, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you. Can I mention some books that I got coming out?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yes.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I wrote a lot of books during lockdown. The last book that I had at the last novel is a book called Red Team Blues, and it's about a forensic accountant called Marty Hench, who's 67 years old and has been in Silicon Valley for 40 years unwinding high-tech finance scams. He is ready to retire. He lives out of a luxury tour bus that one of his clients gave him in lieu of payment, a rock star whose manager run off with all of his money. He's christened it the Unsalted Hash, and he drives up and down California, taking retirement on the installment plan. And an old friend of his, who's a cryptographer from the days when crypto meant cryptography and not cryptocurrency, calls him up for one last job. And it turns out that this guy has actually made a cryptocurrency, which was pretty unwise. And even more unwisely, he's hidden a set of back doors in it so that if things ever go really wrong, he can reach in and twiddle the numbers. And the keys that unlock that back door have gone missing, and Marty has to find them, which turns out to be the easy part of the job. The hard part of the job is the two criminal cartels and the useless and sometimes malicious three-letter agencies that all have an interest in the destiny of these keys, in whose crossfire he finds himself. So it's a fun, high-speed book. My wife is a very long-suffering artist's wife, and she has lots going on in her life, and so she can't read everything I write at this pace that I go. So I gave her this book and said, honey, just read the first couple of pages. Let me know what you think. I think I'm on to something. And I rolled over at 2:30 in the morning to find her sitting up in bed. And I said, what are you doing? And she brandished her phone at me and said, I just had to find out how it ended. The sequel to that book is called The Bezel. It's about prison tech. It comes out in February. And then in between there's a novel coming out in November, also from Tor Books, called The Lost Cause. And it's a book set in Burbank, where I live, after a Green New Deal transition, when people are finally confronting the climate emergency. And it's about the backlash. It's about white nationalist militias and seagoing anarcho-capitalist wreckers who are absolutely bent on halting this progress and bringing us back to the bad old days where we live now. And while the climate emergency is continuing to unroll in those days with floods and fires and heat waves, what they're also doing is actually taking it seriously and trying to remediate it. And there's this sense of hope, and the sense that the hope might be taken away from them. So I just got a great blurb on that from Bill McKibben, and another one from Kim Stanley Robinson. People are really excited about it. And then in September, on the 5th of September, I've got a nonfiction book called The Internet Con: How to Seize the Means of Computation, coming out from Verso Books. And it's a book that's a kind of shovel-ready plan for how we dismantle big tech.
Well, before we go, I do want to extend one opportunity to you.
Okay.
You said that you might have already spoken to a puppet before, but have you ever spoken with a monster before?
Oh, well, keep in mind that I've been involved in politics for 20 years.
Well, yes. And so, I mean, a monster as cute as me.
Oh, I'll say no. No,
Okay.
I'll say no. I mean, it depends on whether we're going to count my daughter as a monster. But because she is cuter than you, and she is
fair enough.
something of a monster. But no, I don't think I've ever spoken to a monster as cute as you.
Well, I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask a monster anything.
Oh.
Yeah. You can ask me any question, and I'll answer it as honestly as I can.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, monsters are not a monolith, but I can speak
Right.
at least from my monster experience.
You're not the monster Lorax who speaks for the Cthulhu or something.
No.
What is a question that I've always wanted to ask a monster? Okay, so if you have a very accurate scale, right, like a weighing scale, and there's a jar in the scale that's sealed, like a big gallon jar, it's full of air, and there's a fly in the scale sitting on the bottom of the jar.
Okay.
And the fly lifts off. Does the weight registered on the scale change?
Ooh. I mean,
that's the thing I've always wondered what a
Yeah.
monster would say about.
I think that's a great question. I would imagine, yes. I mean,
that's what I thought a monster would say.
yes.
Yeah.
And I say that because the way I would prove it would be I would eat the fly and the jar and then weigh
Okay.
myself and then I imagine I would get the same result, like minus my own weight.
Sure. I believe that entirely.
Right.
Good. All right.
I mean, that's
Sold.
science for you. Monster
That's
science anyway.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, Cory, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was the best interview I've ever had by a monster.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, you're making me blush. You can't tell with my blue cheeks, but I am blushing.
Goodbye.
Show!